So yeah, Courtney's up there in LA. He's making work on. We spoke a little yesterday on gasoline culture, I think, on car culture, right?
Yeah, that's what I want to get into. Definitely.
That's pretty cool. Sabith is also LA, and he's making work on southern, how do I say it? Southern Mexican
migration / culture.
Yeah. That's nice stuff. What about you, Sid? What are you working on, man?
And I feel like I'm always working on different things. Right now, I'll say I'm doing more human interest stories in the community that I grew up in a neighborhood called Scarborough here in Toronto. It's like Toronto's East End. It's very much a migrant community, you could say, or like a city within the city itself. So I'm doing a lot of work around public art, documenting stories here and finding ways to put it back on walls or buildings. And kind of building a youth mentorship. So it's a little bit of a community building project, but also documenting stories from the neighborhood I grew up in.
Nice, man. Okay.
Are you based in Toronto, Sid?
Yeah, Toronto.
Okay,
that's
very
right.
cool. All right, welcome.
It's cold, eh?
Yeah, it's we get used to. Toronto's not that bad. I'll take Toronto. It gets colder out here for sure.
Yeah, man. That's meaningful work, man. I think community work and giving back to the place that you live in is. I think as journalists or documentary makers, we forget that sometimes. We think, certainly myself, I'll speak for myself. When I started out, I would look to, the Magnum photographers or, Chris Anderson or the war photographers. And I'd think to myself, man, I want to go abroad and I want to make that rock and roll type stuff. But as I got older, I realized that there's as legitimate or perhaps more relevant, more personally relevant work to be made just on your own doorstep,
100%.
Thanks. Sorry to interrupt, but thanks for the follow, by the way. I was wondering if you have a website or where can I check?
Yeah, I started just getting into the forum, so I'll drop my information there. And
sure.
But yeah, it's I'm always creating stuff, so I'll drop two of the things I built. Scarborough Made is a project I'm building over here, and
okay, very cool.
And I'll kind of share my independent stuff. But Spike, yeah, just following up on that, it's funny because I picked up the camera here in Scarborough, in high school, picking up film. That was like kind of my first positive outlet. So it kind of, while I took on work in different sectors, and I worked in education and stuff in international development, the camera's always been that tool to kind of just allow me to document stories in some way. And it's funny when I came back and I started traveling around, I just felt this calling always sending me back. I'd walk into these neighborhoods that felt like home. I'd be across the world and I'd feel like I'm back in Scarborough sometimes. So I think it was somewhere implanted that I want to come back and document my community. And you're right, impact can it's always seen in different ways, and I've always aspired to kind of do stuff internationally. But the biggest impact I've realized that I've had was actually doing something like in my own neighborhood, because nobody was documenting stuff here. So being able to create something in a place that typically doesn't get the support, it meant a lot.
Yeah, I also think that your neighborhood is international for somebody. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Your neighborhood in Toronto, for me, that's international. And it's also that when you go to make these stories, access is such a problem. I mean, the more you can embed in that community, the more you can translate that empathy that you can describe in the subjects that you're covering, the better the work is. So if it's in your community, you're already embedded anyway, so you're going to make strong work there.
100%. Yeah.
Like, and your photos are beautiful, man. I've been through your Instagram. Your work's super, super lovely.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah, no worries. All right. So I think in my phone conversations with you guys so far, we've been talking about kind of early stage project development. Sid, I don't know quite where you are, but I have a feeling you might be like developing projects as well at the moment. So like, I hope I haven't answered all your questions already on the early stage stuff, but what questions do you have this morning? Has anyone got anything any topics that you want me to hit on?
So a quick update, Spike, if I may. So I started pitching the story that I ran by you. to about 3 outlets in the form that it's at right now. And of course, it can be developed further. Good news, I got a rejection, which means somebody read it.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, at least someone's reading it. So for the first time, I felt good about a rejection, right? Because it's better to hear back than not. So I'm working on the larger picture, a larger story, which you shared about in terms of what are the struggles of these artisans. And I do have interviews with about 8 or 10 artisans in the region. So that can become the larger story. And I think that has a bigger scope in terms of pitching it to LA Times or other national outlets. So, and obviously that means I'm reading through all the transcripts. I have all the material with me. It's going to take me a few weeks to just put the narrative together and then write the pitch. That's how I prefer to work. So that's my big story that I'm working on right now.
Okay, that's great, man. Well, congratulations on your rejection.
Yeah, thank you.
When I was to give the other guys context, do you mind if I describe your story a little bit? Yeah. So Sabith is pitching a story at the moment on the fabric industry in southern Mexico, and it's about how they're dyeing fabrics out there, and perhaps supply issues in how they're finding those natural dyes. And then there's a migration element as well. It's an interesting topic. And when I was growing up, my dad used to. So I've worked so many shitty jobs in my life. I've worked in warehouses, and I've worked in factories, and I've dug swimming pools, and I've laid patios, and I've worked, like everyone does. And my old man, my dad would always tell me when I was applying for a new job, he'd always say, before you get a job, you have to get 30 rejections, right? So, and I think it applies to this as well. It applies, and I'm not saying that on every pitch you make, you have to get 30 rejections, but it's just a good mentality to have. It stops you being scared of sending pitches in. It stops you being disheartened by getting those rejections when you're pitching, which is inevitable. And it just forces you to get those numbers in, forces you to reach out to enough people to make the odds to get the 2 or 3 that say, yes, I'll buy. And it also, you also get feedback in that negative. So maybe somebody will drop a hint. Maybe someone will say, no, I don't want to publish it right now. Maybe they'll just say, we don't have the space in the magazine because we're full up. Or maybe they'll say, cause the narrative doesn't fit, or it's not direct enough, or it's not distilled enough, or the narrative is a little bit incorrect, which means that if they give you that little breadcrumb trail, you can adapt and even send it back to them. So Sabith, did they give you what did they say?
So she did actually, to the female editor, she said so they're looking for very specific narratives, right? They said, we're looking for very unique stories. This seems a little generic for us, so it doesn't really make the cut. I said, fine. And she said, there are other outlets which might accept it as is, but that's not us. So read through a few more of our stories and come back to us, which I think is valuable.
Yeah. Which outlet was it?
It's called Narratively. It's a magazine, and let me pop in the website here for you guys. So they look for very specific narratives. So it is text-based. However, they do have a photo editor, which means they do accept photo stories or photo essays.
Right.
Yeah, this is the one I'm talking about.
Oh, I see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well done, man. That's good. That's good. It's good work on sending it in.
Yeah.
Keep going. Just keep going, and you'll find somebody.
Of course. And Spike, on that note, how many editors do you pitch to per story, or do you have like a rule of thumb? Do you stop after like 5 pitches, or what's your method?
No, I probably each story I'll pitch to. I have a contact list of, I think it's like 12,000 people, producers and photo editors. So, and I'm pitching stills and video depending on what the story is. Actually, that's an interesting point. So I think Sid is stills Sabith, I know you're stills, and Courtney is video. So then I go down my contact list and I find anyone who's relevant to the topic, anyone who I think the topic might fit with, and it's normally about 100 people.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I'd say pitch to as many people as possible. And you did ask me the other day, Sabith, I remember you asked me whether it's appropriate to pitch to more than one editor or producer at once. Absolutely it is. You pitch to as many as possible at the same time, and ideally you end in a bidding war. You either end in a bidding war between those two outlets. It's a little bit like if you are offered two jobs at the same time,
right?
And you can say to the job that perhaps the job that you like less offers 100 grand, and the job that you like more offers 80. You can go to that job that you like more and say, well, yeah, I really want to work with you, but these guys have offered a little bit more. Can you match it? So I made a story about the release of Burma's child soldiers a few years ago. And I pitched it around, and I had, who was it? I think it was Vice magazine and Al Jazeera came back from the English language market, and they both wanted to publish it. And I whenever we speak about publishing as well, you'll hear me say that it's better if you try to negotiate non-exclusive licenses, because then you can publish with multiple outlets. Al Jazeera they wanted exclusivity. So it's really expensive at that point for them to buy that. And they were
just like triple or quadruple the amount. Say if it's going for 3,000, tell them, hey, give me 20 grand, it's all yours.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right?
But yeah, pretty much. But the problem is that normally blows the budget for most outlets. So what normally ends up happening is they reach an agreement where the person who is willing to pay more, so in this case Al Jazeera, would publish first, and they have exclusivity for just 2 weeks. And then once that 14 days finishes, Vice could publish and pay a little bit less. So yeah.
That's smart. Yeah.
But then in a non-competitive market, so that's in this case non-English language, you can publish at the same time. They don't mind if you publish at the same time in French, for example. And that's the idea, isn't it? Is to take that one piece. Like Courtney, we were speaking on the phone yesterday about making one killer documentary piece and pitching it to those news outlets, but at the same time pitching it to like auto car brands and stuff like that. It's about taking that one project and trying to make as many sales as possible from that one thing. And the anything you can do to up the chances of doing that, and in this case perhaps that's reaching out to 10 editors, 20 editors, 30 contacts, whatever. So yeah, the more people that you can get it in front of, the better. Yeah.
I'm still personally struggling with this idea of selling the same thing to multiple people. It's so alien to me. I'm from the academy. I work in university, by the way, for Courtney and Sid. So for us, it's like you submit to one journal at a time. You usually wait for months. One of my articles, by the way, is still in editor's desk. It's been more than a year. Yeah. I haven't heard from them, and that's considered normal. So for this is weird for me. This is like strange. I mean, in a nice way, right? I don't have to wait around. I can do what the hell I want. So yeah, it's liberating almost.
Oh, good. I'm glad. It's a little bit of a. I mean, I think when we come in, certainly for me, when I came into photography and journalism, I'm an artist by training and an artist at heart, and I have a non-business mindset. I'm not ruthless in that kind of way. But when we dig into it, and when the process of producing our work is artistic and creative and inspirational, you know what I mean? And then you get to this side, you get to the business side, you get to reaching out to contacts, and you get to negotiating money, and it is a for-profit market. So you have to, at some point you have to switch gear a little bit and be slightly more ruthless. Only because I know none of us are in this to get rich. If I think we were, we would have gone into banking or something like that. But that switch has to flip in order to survive a little bit. Because if you sell that one piece once, and say you spend a month making it, 2 months making it, or a month researching and a month making, or something like that, and you only sell it once and you make 5 grand, it's okay money, but 5 grand for 2 months work, you know what I mean? You sell that 3 times or 4 times, then, you know, 15 grand, and then maybe you get a grant on top as well for 10, you know, then you're making money that is sustainable long term. And also, to make these stories, it takes, I know you will know this because you're doing it already, but it takes massive effort. It takes effort in terms of emotional output, and it takes effort in terms of cognitive output, relationship output. So you just have to make sure you're compensated in that marketing stage, in that sales stage, really. The other thing about it is that the other reason why it's important to make those multiple sales is because the industry budgets top out at a certain level.
Sure.
So for video, they top out at about $1,000 per. If it's a personal story and you come to them with a ready-made offer, the video markets top out at $1,000 per minute. So 5 grand for a 5-minute piece, 10 for a 10-minute piece. Photo is slightly less. If they come to you with an assignment, the budgets top out at $1,000 a day, which is good money if you can do 2 or 3 of them a week. But yeah, but because those budgets top out, it's important to make those multiple sales from the one story to make a good living. Yeah. Hey Sid, what about you, man? Is there anything that are you got any questions that I can answer right now that might help you?
Yeah, I'm kind of just soaking it in. I guess
good.
My work, I guess it feels unique, not so much, but because it's more recent. So I'm just pulling up the screen, see everybody. I've almost, I've dabbled in documentary photography, not as very much as a self passion, right? Like I worked in education, funny enough, savage, but I didn't work in academia stuff. I worked in student affairs. So I went from, just jumping to school to graduate and finding that I had a passion for building things. And it was really much about building community, and, started over there. So when I graduated and I thought I was just going to go and jump in a one-way ticket to go bartend somewhere, I found it was a good place for me to have impact in the university that I was at. And, I started doing work closer with the communities that I grew up in. And I was kind of doing mentorship programs. So I started from there, but that camera's always been the tool. And, I've always found ways to document it throughout university, even before, my own neighborhood, like documenting my friends who wanted to make hip hop videos. Things like that when there was no cameras around, and it wasn't, not everybody had a camera to shoot. I'd pick up a camera and I started, kind of creating. And so when I decided to like leave that and kind of pursue things independently, which kind of pushed me internationally and aligned me closer to international development work, where I continue to study and take on more stuff. After the pandemic hit, just about that time, I was working on a project while I was in school, Scarborough Made. I'll share that link just so everybody kind of gets an idea of it.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And it kind of beat on something that was needed in Scarborough specifically. And I say this with Scarboroughs of the world, right? Because Scarborough is very much a migrant city. It's an underserved community, has tons of different neighborhoods, tons of different ethnicities, backgrounds, a big amount of community housing, you could say, in certain components. So it's always kind of been placed in the media as a disenfranchised space. The media usually reports the shootings more than it reports the community. We've grown up here. I came here in '99 to Canada by way of the Gulf. So for me, it was a different experience. And my colleague, who I went to school with too, we live in the same neighborhood, and we both had this grit, and everybody does. Everybody, they say, there's almost this Scarborough Renaissance going right now, which is new because it was always there, this pride. But now people like The Weeknd, who came out of Scarborough, performed at the Super Bowl last year, as an example. So there's this spotlight that's coming back in these communities. We've been documenting from 2019, and now we see this huge emergence of people documenting. All that was self-taught and self-developed, so very much self-directing the way that we started pitching stuff by just investing our own funds. I might have taken a little bit out of my student loan even to finance the first public art project. But when we got it done, we were happy enough, and I guess we had the opportunity and access to actually get it up in Nuit Blanche, Toronto, which is one of the largest public art festivals, or you could say like contemporary art festivals within Canada, North America. They kind of give that claim to name over here. So it was done in Scarborough, and we took over this basement of the Civic Center, and we just covered the wall with portraits. We did a crazy amount of shooting in 1 week for one component of the project, and then we started building out the other stories for. I think we started off with a 24-hour project. I don't know if anybody knows that. It's something I did when I was in Australia. It's like, it's wild. It's this idea of documenting stories for 24 hours and sharing it every hour. Yeah, it's an international project. So we wanted to kind of spotlight Scarborough. We were able to kind of get that storytelling done, with Scarborough and shooting stories of women, Pulse stories. And that's what opened up the doors for us to pitch to larger places. So it's almost like we did the work. One of the people we shot was a curator for Nuit Blanche. And by way of that, we were able to, get onto a larger platform and just, be an independent project there, but show people what we could do. So we have, this project, which is, photography and cinematography put together. My boy takes care of the cinematography. I do the photography. And we kind of had that as a platform. And we paused on it because we realized it was a lot of work. And when the pandemic kind of put everybody in a place where they were grounded, it allowed me to kind of go back to this and maybe, invest a little bit more time. So I invested last year. I kind of went full time with it, and we just scaled it. Yeah, we scaled it to the point where, we're looking at turning it into a nonprofit maybe this year, maybe down the road. So it's interesting because we came from a point of, just self-directing work. All my stuff has been more geared towards documentary. I've worked in different sectors, so I shoot, but I've never pitched as much. And now we're steadily on grant funding, and so I'm pitching all the time, but I'm only pitching the grants. So I'd say 100% of everything that we do with Scarborough Made is all grant funded. Toronto has, I've realized now, maybe not later, it would have been helpful, but better late than never. Toronto and Canada has a good grant ecosystem for artists. Yeah. So using that funding, we were able to kind of create a lot. So I'm doing the pitching, but I'm doing a lot of writing, and maybe like Samit, you were saying, I do a lot of writing, which I'm not rinsing and repeating, which, I'm starting to realize like that. I just put in an application in this past month, a joint application for a project over here with Scarborough Made. And that's the first time I was starting to like condense, the wording and writing in terms of articles and trying to tie in policies to be able to build projects. So at that point with Scarborough Made, which is a strong body of work, we almost are creating an economy around it. And then at the same time, I'm now wanting to really dive back into my independent stuff, like what I was starting to create. Which Scarborough Made was, one of those ideas. I'm now trying to find additional ideas that will help refine some of the work that I've been doing. Because I've noticed that, I typically I'm a gunner. So if it's something that's for hire, I'll take it, in order to bring it in. So I want to kind of, get a little bit more focused and back to the roots of why I'm creating, looking for that impact, looking for stories that are meaningful. And I guess, Spike, what I like about your work, you really focus in terms of that direction, that passion, that story around conflict. And I've realized like even a lot of my work is very tied into like the humanitarian international development sector and finding ways I can do it locally, right? Like food security, even migrant stories, stuff that I've really been kind of close to because it's kind of mapped my own journey in places I've traveled to. So trying to get back on that to do more personal pitching and do more personal grants. I think it's going to be the game this year.
Nice, man. Well, you're on a awesome path, and I'm so happy that you've already cracked grant applications. That's a massive deal.
Yeah,
That's a
it
massive
was.
deal. Yeah.
I think it was a bit of years of putting different things together, and yeah, and it was needed. Honestly, maybe that was it too. People saw the project and they're like, Scarborough is a place that needs a community, so, the support. So the funding was definitely there. So I'm hoping it, we can still knocking on doors.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to scale that up a lot more, where I'm bumping out a lot more applications.
Yeah. But it sounds like at the same time, you're going to start making solo stories to pitch to publications yourself.
Yeah. I'd like to maybe even look at, we always say Scarborough to the world, where we want to take these stories and find it. So I might start using even, the stories from Scarborough Made to see if it's possible that I can start to, build it to some publications. Because we own all the licensing, and we have other youth contributing now, which is cool, because it's not just, me as a documentary photographer, but it's a group of people that are contributing, and we're trying to build that economy around different youth artists and creative mentorship programs. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there that we're creating, almost like, an organization that supports creators. And then for me, I think part of it was, okay, what are, Scarborough Made is a project that, I've been able to build, get off the ground, and I'm still leading. How do I get back into some of the more independent stuff? That is non-commercial. I don't shoot that much commercial, but I often, I'll shoot it with a colleague, like fashion shoots. But documentary is my heart. My style is very much driven to documentary, shooting with a prime. Try to keep low and one body, and just kind of work your way through different settings, no natural lighting. So I want to try to get back to those roots and explore stories that I think even our year in Scarborough, to have Scarborough and beyond, even Ontario and Canada, to have a development focus. Topics of food security, I think is something during the pandemic that a lot of places started realizing. I'm trying to understand that documentation piece. I'm back. I'm almost like overhauling everything and trying to pick up the pieces of what I've done before. Spend some time analyzing that, and then seeing how do I shift my aesthetic. Also, I think that might be one of the things I'm really trying to dive into to refine my work. That was a lot. I hope that wrap was helpful, guys.
Yeah, it's nice, man. It's a really nice direction as well. I really appreciate taking things back to basics. It's something I feel myself as well, where we can progress through this industry, get in a bigger camera, and then we move to video, and then we've got lav mics and shotgun mics, and then maybe we need a 2-camera interview, and then what I mean, and then just the equipment itself can just multiply and multiply and multiply, and then you're not doing what you began with anymore. And for me, that's a 35mm camera with a 50mm lens, and the same as you, just working through it nice and simple. There's I also like what I like about your work, and actually all your work, Sabith, this is true for you as well, and Courtney, this is also true for you, is bodies of work that come from one place. So Sid, your stuff is of course a really good oh my goodness, sorry, I've got a Zoom notification for 40-minute limit. I don't know what that means. What was I saying? Oh yeah, what I really like about your work, Sid, is it all comes from that one place. And I think when we're pitching and when we're making stories, it's helpful for that narrative. It's helpful to funnel your ideas into some boundaries, because if we try and create from infinite boundaries, we're lucky people. We can probably go anywhere in the world that we want to, and we can work on anything we want to. This vocation that we all have allows you to do that. Probably we're all fairly financially well off, but to place those boundaries on your creativity forces you to find those interesting narratives that are around you and in that one place. And I really like, there's a couple of projects that might be relevant. There's one, it's really old now, it's New York Times, it's called 1 in 8 million. You know that
concept? We built Scarborough Made on different concepts, and one of the concepts that I pulled was 1 in 8 million.
Because it reminds me of your work, or the opposite. It's so nice. And for you guys who might not have seen it, it's they're character profiles of New Yorkers published in the New York Times, shot black and white photography, but with so it's a series of still photographs with an audio soundtrack underneath of the character narrating their journey. And they're all really strange characters. So like one is an ex-convict who's got tattoos everywhere, but now he's a bicycle racer, you know. It's not, yeah, the characters are just a little bit wacky, a little bit left field. I really like that. And there's also, I don't know whether you've seen Disturbed, Sid.
Yes, I'm a big fan of JR.
That reminds me of your stuff too.
Yeah, I don't know if you know JR. Anybody knows JR work? JR, he's the French. He's a French. He started as a graffiti artist. I'll share his. He had a TED talk to use art to change the world. And I've really pulled a lot of my inspiration for public art and using portraiture back in communities from what he does. And he has this project called the Inside Out Project. I don't know if people have heard of that. You will typically see, I think my screen. If you can see my screen, that's the photo that like will be printed off, where he has this truck that will essentially come in and have people walk into the truck and print out these portraits in large format paper. And then they would just paste it in places. I'm gonna find a link and just share with everyone. But JR was probably one of the inspirations that pulled me back into arts when I was in education. I wasn't finding the connection between, here's the website. I wasn't finding the connection between the commercial side of photography, which I wasn't really leaning towards, and then how photography can impact communities. When I saw JR's work, I think it was a 2011 TED talk about how he used this project to influence, not influence, but like build community and bring people together. It was like a light went off. That was my aha moment of like, hey, there's something over here where you can actually maybe build something with photography or the arts and community and find ways to engage. I was always inspired with that. So yeah, we've similar to Disturbed, they take like portraits of stories. I like what Disturbed does. I saw it in Australia, and they have that photojournalism. So they captivate the actual stories, the written piece, and they wheat paste it. They wheat paste it in different places, and I like that format of just being able to make the streets your largest gallery.
Yeah, I love that too. Yeah, well, beautiful. You have that's a beautiful background to your work. Beautiful inspirations as well. I love all that work myself. That's where I take a lot of my stuff from. What about you other guys? Any other questions right now? I've done a lot of talking.
I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
Two things. One is there's a Black or women's motorcycle group that I mentioned to you yesterday, and I'm thinking about reaching out to them. I want to, but I feel like for some reason they're going to want something in return, in the sense of like I'll shoot this. I have an idea. I don't know what's there, but let's find it. But I feel like they're gonna want to post it on their channel.
Okay, yeah.
And this is just like, how would you kind of navigate, like, to say, I have an idea, like I want to film something on you, but I'm gonna profit off of it. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. Well, actually, one thing before I answer that, if this thing kicks me out in 3 minutes, I think I might have reached the limit of my 40-minute thing. So I'll just log back in, and you guys can log back in too, as a worst case scenario. But that's a good question. In terms of giving your subject something, some people ask me sometimes if they should pay the people that they hang out with. That's a definite no. Because, and I know that's not necessarily your question, but if I feel like if we begin to give the people that we're hanging out with things, then it changes the dynamic. And often I've found that they will begin, sometimes in a worst case scenario, I've found that some people will change their story based on how much money they can get for it. So as a blanket answer to giving people physical things, Really try and stay away from that. I know in the commercial world, sometimes we pay our models and we pay our, you know, fixers, and well, actually, don't absolutely pay fixers, but in the documentary world, try not to give anything. I think for me, if somebody says, can I use those photos or that video on my own platforms, I say, yeah, because for me, it doesn't matter. But what I agree with them is that I think it's fair, isn't it? Because the images are of them.
Right.
Yeah. And for me, I say to them, yeah, of course, I'll give you everything and you can use it in any way you want, but please only post it after I've published. And after I've made all the sales that I'm going to make. And also in terms of the ethics behind people feeling like you're profiting from them, that's a weird one. Mostly people are happy that you are there to tell their story. And I don't like the idea that, I mean, if people feel uncomfortable in hanging out with you because they think that you're profiting from them, then probably they're not a great subject, because they perhaps don't trust the process. You can try and overturn that distrust and put their mind at ease and say, well, you know, this isn't, yes, I will make money, but my motivations for being in this industry are not wealth. The money that I do make keeps me alive and keeps me able to be telling these stories from marginalized or smaller communities, or you know, people whose stories need to be told. So I think you can kind of explain it like that, and I don't think that's for me, it's not dishonest, and it doesn't feel to me, Courtney, like you're in this for as a wealth grab. I don't think.
No.
I don't get that feeling from any of us. So I think just explaining that to them, say, yeah, of course you can have all the video that I shoot if you're comfortable giving it to them.
Yeah.
But then try and tell them that you're not in it to get rich off them. Yeah. Most people, though, when you reach out and say, look, I'm really find what you're doing interesting, I would love to spend time with you. Most people, unless they are doing something, unless it's like a really heightened political point, like politics, most people are just happy that, or most people are just flattered that you're interested in them and you want to spend time with them. Yeah. I feel like most people will want you to hang out with them, but then will be a bit shy around the camera until they've got used to you. Does that answer it better?
Yeah, that answers it. And not saying I haven't even had that conversation, but I just wanted to make sure I would be prepared if that were to come up. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like that's one thing. And I had I've never thought that way about any other thing, but I thought for some reason, because they sell stuff on their website, you know, they're very much not, and they're not just a business, but that's by any means. But I said I saw something from another car community that was like, if you want to do this, you got to pay me type of thing. And it was like, interesting. So I'm like, all right, well, it just made me think about that. So that was one of my questions.
I think those people that say, if you want to do this, you've got to pay me. If they say that straight up initially, then they're not, I wouldn't say that they're correct people to be hanging out with, because I mean, they're already making a money grab.
Right.
And I like to think of it as a collaboration between that subject and yourself going into video, or myself going into video or photo. You know, we both put time and energy into the relationship, and we make something together. And often for example, if I'm hanging out with a group for a week, I'll make a frame grab, or I'll take one of the photographs and I'll print it up for them. And I don't offer this to begin with because I don't want them to have expectations that there are things involved, but it's a nice thing to do. You can turn up and say, look, I made this photograph of you last week. I think it's real nice. Maybe here it is as a gift.
Yeah.
And then they realize that, you know, you're not in it just to take. You've made this real nice thing for them.
Yeah,
And then it becomes to be a friendly relationship rather than the perception of taking,
definitely.
which is difficult. Yeah.
My other question is, in regards to pitching, for us just starting off building our 12,000 contact list, when you first started off pitching your ideas to outlets, did you have a target outlet in mind? I am like, is a difference between like a local news outlet versus BBC World News, so like, how do you gauge who you start off with, or do you just go to everyone? You just, whoever you can contact, you can get a hold of, you pitch to. There was no small, medium, large, international. It was like, what was your kind of process in looking at that?
Yeah, thanks. I went for everybody. Yeah, but my contact list was really small when I started. I think I only had like, my friend gave me 10 contacts, and then someone else gave me maybe 10 or something. So it was only like 20, and they were large. And then I had like smaller ones, like here in Texas, we've got Texas Monthly, which is of course, statewide magazine. So I had some like local outlets like that as well. So don't necessarily limit yourself at all. And the first outlet that my work published in, I got really lucky. On the first project that I made, when I was just finishing up education, it won some sort of competition, photo competition, and it was enough for me to reach out. So then I wrote to those 20 or 30 contacts that I had at the time, and I said, look, this project has just won this competition. It was a smallish competition, and that was enough to get them to open that email to then publish just 1 or 2 photos from that series. And that was the New Yorker. So I didn't start small, and it was totally luck, probably. But it's proof that you don't need to go local first. You can start national. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
If your work's good, then people will want it. It doesn't matter if you don't have to work up the ladder. And it's also like, you don't have to go in with a resume. You don't have to say, you don't have to try and climb that mountain up to the pinnacle, which is what, National Geographic or something like that. Or you can go straight to the top. There's no rules in this. Doesn't matter. Yeah. Just get stuck in. Yeah. It's nice like that, I think. And then also, like, the next story, I pitched to all those big ones again, and none of the big ones wanted it, and I sold it to Vice magazine, who were doing okay at the time, but pretty niche. Yeah. So yeah, I think and actually over the next, I'm sure this is interesting, over the next few weeks, I'll start putting small amounts of contacts into the membership as well for you guys to use, because I have those big lists. So I'm filtering out ones that I think are relevant for people in the membership, and I'll start dumping contacts in there which it will speed you up as well, because I mean, people gave me contacts when I was starting out. Yeah. It will make it, because searching for those contacts and making those lists yourselves is long, very long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A Spike, related question. So are there media directories that one could buy, just for names? And I know those may not be updated because people keep leaving, right? Media is such a dynamic space.
Yeah.
But what's your take on that?
That's a difficult one, because there are, and I have used some, but they're very hit or miss, because like you say, people leave the people leave those positions. And what I also see is that those producers and the editors, there's a circle in documentary media where they all move from outlet to outlet. So like I've been in touch with one lady over the last 12 years, and she has worked at National Geographic, Washington Post, and the Smithsonian. So those databases are they're okay, but it's difficult because once those people move on, there's nobody updating those contact lists because they're so big that it's impossible to keep them updated. So what happens is you download this contact list and then you send out an email blast to 100 people and half of them fail because those people don't work there anymore. And then you have to manually go back and figure out where that person works. So you might as well just do it manually anyway.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Which actually leads me to another topic. And that is, when you guys are emailing, are you emailing or will you email individually, or are you thinking about using like MailChimp or something?
I saw your notes on the individual piece, and you're right. MailChimp does not get much of a open rate. I use it for like maybe blast to the community, but for like pitches, I will always do one-on-one.
Okay, good.
Me too. Yeah. Me as well.
That's better. I use MailChimp for within this membership actually, and it's good for that. But I feel like in the past where I've been pitching work to people, it's much better to be one-on-one. It slows you down. You can be real careful. You can be a bit more personal about it. And you've got to be personal. Otherwise they'll see that it's a email list and will not open it. It's a dangerous trap.
Spike, you also talking about this, but I know Hunter.io. I haven't used it entirely or made the most of it, but I know Hunter.io is like the AI software to help scrub like, contact lists. When I was trying to find contacts and I was going to go through like media contacts for PR, I was looking at that. And then Twitter is, I guess, everyone's best friend, I think, for journalists, to finding journalists who want to print stories. We've used that to source, maybe potential people we can, pitch locally.
Oh yeah.
But in terms of sourcing, you're right. Like it changes so often, and maintaining those databases, they start to, you have to constantly look at them, every quarter just to see, who's there. So yeah, you could scale it quite big. Spike, I had a question in terms of maybe more at the research phase and how you guide your research to kind of define topics. And I think I'm going back of that. There's so many topics that, you can cover, and, trying to align topics that are interest-based stories that are typically things that may not be covered. I did this, short stint where I signed on with Zuma Press as a photojournalism agency.
I know that.
Yeah. So I had a friend of mine, a colleague, Brazilian photojournalist. I went to school with him, and he put me on there. So I signed on with him, and it was interesting because it gave me that first eye into, going and shooting journalism. They shoot more news-based stuff, so it's very reactive. As soon as something happens. So I tried it out, and I didn't know if that was my medium, because I do like the long form. I like to go in and document things over time.
Yeah, me too.
And then the licensing also came up of, are you actually going to be able to break bread with their licensing versus you doing it yourself? And that's when I realized, I'm like, okay, maybe this is good. I like, this direction, but maybe it's not this agency. So how do I start to build? And that's when the independent would kind of take on more with Scarborough Made. So I wanted to go back into the research phase, and even looking at my past work to pull out themes that I've done. But how do you guide, your research to identify topics? You mentioned a little bit about like looking at journals, which I thought was cool. How do you look at that?
Well, it starts with what I'm interested in. And that's, I know I can see that all you guys are working in that way as well. Like, Courtney, you're working on cars and bikes. Who doesn't like cars and bikes?
Straight up.
You know what I mean? So I start with what I'm interested in, and then I just follow down that rabbit hole, really. I look at, like you mentioned, I look at scientific journals to find angles on the things that I'm interested in that haven't been published yet. So like, you know, I mean, what am I interested in? Hang on, let me give you an example. Wow, I can't think of anything right now. It's too early in the morning for me. Yeah, it's the intersection of what I'm interested in, and then also what I can see there's a gap in the market for want of a better word. So what type of stories have not been made. So not that I'm interested in it personally, but I'm intrigued by it, and that's American gun culture. So a lot of my work in the past has been on American gun culture, but there's a lot of other people's work on American gun culture, right? You know, Zed Nelson, you've seen that guy? Wait, I'll post you a link. And so I began making work on American gun culture, and then everyone was like, oh, your work's just like Zed Nelson's. And I was like, oh, well, that's annoying because I thought my work was original. Hang on, here it is. So then around those larger topics that I'm interested in, try and find a way of covering it that is new. Yeah. And in order to do that, you need to find that way of covering your topic that's new. Otherwise it's not useful or interesting to an outlet. You'll send it to them and they'll be like, wow, Spike, your work is exactly like Zed Nelson. We just published that last week. So go away and think of another way in. And the way I find an interesting frame on that thing is scientific journals. I don't look at Google or anything like that because everything on Google has already been published. And then interviewing people, and Sabith, you'll be good at this. This is one for you because I know that you're a writer, you're a reporter already. But it's finding people around your topic who are knowledgeable on, for example, with me, gun culture, and then just saying, look, I'm not photographing yet, but I'm researching this project. Can I phone you up and have a quick interview? And then what begins to happen is you find threads of this real large story that are interesting. So in gun culture, one of the frames that was interesting to me is active shooter incidents and the way that those cultural reactions evolve around training for these events. So then that leads to, all right, well then how are police training for these events? And then that leads to, what is the equipment that police are using to train for these events, and where does that come from? And it comes from, Afghanistan and methodologies of stopping blood flow that are, oh my goodness, I can't think of the word. They make up on the spot, trial and error, those types of things. So it's just, I'm not explaining very well, but it's following that thread down a rabbit hole. You just find one thing that's kind of interesting to you, and then you research it a load. You research it on scientific journals. You speak to people, and you go down that rabbit hole.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's almost like story branching, right? Like you have your topic, and then the rabbit hole is the key word. You got to go follow the rabbit hole that stand out.
Go down that rabbit hole, man. But also, I think the more you start with that broad topic, and the more niche you get, the more niche you get down that rabbit hole, the more you pull that interesting thread, the more your work will specialize. So, and that's the key, really. I think the more you can specialize inside that umbrella topic, the less chance you'll have that you'll find somebody who's already made that work. So there's another chapter to this gun culture piece, this police training, active shooter incident that I'd like to make, that I know nobody's published because it's new. And it's that police are now using virtual reality to train their officers in these scenarios. And that's a crazy thing. Imagine what that looks like visually, you know. So, and I know no one's made that because from interviewing those police beforehand, I know it's brand new. I know they only started doing it a month ago, and that came from following the previous rabbit hole. So a lot of my stories, perhaps I got lucky in the beginning where I found an area that was undercovered and that was also interested to me. And then as I've gone on through time, working in this place that's undercovered that I got lucky to find, I've found other offshoots that are also interesting to me. You know, I also spend a lot of time, I spend a lot of time around conflict and whether it's training or military or police or a broad active conflict. I spend a lot of time around the topic of mortality, you know, watching people push the limits of what they're comfortable, in terms of risk, how the stories they tell themselves in terms of why is this worthwhile to go through this risk, you know, and then where they think they're going to afterwards. So now, because of that, it's a very unrelated topic, but I'm interested in the hunt for immortality, you know, transhumanism, cryogenics. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's just watching your own mind and seeing where your own mind tries to go down these side streets. Yeah. And then just niching it down so far that nobody else has covered it. Because there's a lot of stuff, if we look on the internet and we look on the New York Times already. I mean, so New York, what's happening right now? Ukraine, New York Times, that's all over everywhere. I could go back, I've been to Ukraine, I could go back to Ukraine and I could cover the war in Ukraine again. But I've done that and everyone else is doing that. And it's such a broad topic that Zuma Press will be doing it, but it's kind of not interesting. What is interesting is a story about, you know, something more, 1 in 8 million, you know what I mean? Or somebody who's escaping trauma and found a female bike gang. That's more interesting, you know, for me. So yeah, just niche down real hard. That was a convoluted answer. I hope that helps though.
No, but it's good. It gave the context to it in terms of like what the process is to get there, right?
Yeah, you made me think on that one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's difficult though. Huh? So in terms of pitching and in selling work, that is the thing that that's the turning point between just making work and selling work, is how you can explain to your audience of editors and producers, and through them their audience, how you can frame this work as different to everybody else's. That is the only trick. And it's here's this work, it's different to everybody else's because of this. That's the trick to selling work. That's all it is. And everything else around that is padding.
Say that one more time. I've missed.
So the trick to publishing work is being able to explain to a producer or editor, being able to show this work is different and it's worthwhile because of this, whatever this is, you know. It's being able to find that topic, and instead of just covering that topic in the same way that everybody else is at face value, it's being able to find an angle on that topic. So Courtney, for you, this is this female bike gang is so important to its members because it's helping them overcome, for example, past trauma. This is not just, this is a bike gang that's interesting because this is a female bike gang. This is a bike gang because it's helping those female members overcome past trauma. That's such an interesting angle on that topic that you can go to that editor or producer and say, here's this work, this is interesting because of this really interesting angle. And that because of this interesting angle is the key to publishing work. That's all it is. And, you know, so for you, it would be something like, at face value, these are people in Oaxaca who are using natural ingredients to dye their clothes, but an angle that might be more interesting is these are people who are using natural ingredients to dye their clothes, and because of that, they are finding enough money to fund their family's migration to California or something like that. It's that oblique angle on a topic that's interesting. And for me, what is it? It's like, oh God, for some reason I can't give examples about my own work. Hang on, let me think. It's like, okay, well, I'll go back to the gun culture again. It's not, you know, this is direct coverage of the shooting in Las Vegas, because everyone's seen that and everyone's covered that same angle. It's, well, what are we doing as a culture to slow these things down in the future? What's happening behind the scenes? What are the police doing? Oh, wait, over here, there's teachers carrying pistols into the classroom as a precautionary security method to protect their children if a gunman comes in the classroom. That's more interesting than just photographing a shooting. That's the key. Framing. There's a few articles I've put in the membership about framing. Maybe I should do some more on it, but that's the trick. Yeah, is that helpful? Or if I just rambled and said a load of words that mean nothing?
No. It's good in the sense where, you know, like I just from that short stint trying out with Zuma Press, the reactionary part, you're right. It's you know, I had those refugee clinic that I have a close contact with because we documented the story. My mom actually, you know, she volunteers there at that clinic, so I knew the founder, and they were during the COVID, they had like a tent being built. You know, this is during the early onset. You know, they were the first ones to kind of build a tent in Scarborough to like take in refugees, you know, just for check-ins and so on. So I thought, you know, I'm going to be there. You know, it's going to be, you know, a story that, you know, I can go in and document, and all the media outlets were there. And then I realized how reactionary, you know, the time of COVID was, when as soon as something comes out, it's like everybody's there to document it. And, you know, media typically doesn't come out to Scarborough that much. It was a good story. I'm glad they got that spotlight, but it also showed me, like, you know, things are very reactionary. As soon as you got all that coverage, it's going out right there and that day. So it kind of showed me that, okay, maybe I need to like dig in more. So like what aspects of this can I tell differently, right? Like, and so I think migration for me has been, you know, something that has been an ongoing topic. Even when I write a lot, it's geared towards, like, you know, traveling between different countries and, you know, living in different zones, and looking at the migrant experience, you know, for workers and refugees and what that looks like. So I think I'm gonna have a coffee date with a rabbit hole or a few rabbit holes.
Oh yeah, man.
Later on today, and just go down there.
Yeah, you are correct. It's when you see something happen in the news, when you see COVID or a shooting, or I don't know, when you see that breaking news, you see everybody show up with cameras, and you see Zuma Press, and you see Getty, and you see the New York Times, and you see them show up with quite large amounts of money, you know, of course, because they're paying their staff pretty well. And you see them making, like you say, Sid, really reactionary work. It's very literal. It's here's what's happening now, today, and then they publish it that afternoon.
Yeah.
So I cannot compete with that. and nor really do I want to, because the stress level of making work like that is massive.
Yeah.
And also, what do I really learn? I don't really learn anything because I haven't dug deeper.
100%.
So that's why there's another method of making these narratives, and it's spending a lot of time, and it's learning, and it's building empathy. And the quality is 1,000 times better. Like if you see those stories in the breaking news, you might get one solid good image, front page New York Times, but you haven't got those 20 images. Courtney, you haven't got like that 10-minute, film that really lets you into that person's lives. It's very one-sided, and it's quite shallow. But yeah, if you dig deeper, there's so much more you can make, and also you can make a bigger impact to the people that you're covering if you're telling stories in a deeper way. Yeah.
100%.
So yeah, that's all to say you are correct. Yeah. It's interesting as I talk to more of you guys, there's crossovers in what so Beef and Sid, you guys are both kind of around migration.
Mhm.
It's interesting. I wonder whether there'll be collaborations happening in the future. I hope so.
Yeah, I'm going to Toronto only in the summer, so.
Oh shit.
That's the only time to come to Toronto.
Yeah, that's true, man. Same in Chicago.
Too cold to go in winter.
Oh, it's cold as hell right now.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything that you want help with immediately right now before I let you guys go?
Oh, Spike, I'm working on 2 other pitches. I'm sort of in a phase where I have 10 ideas right now. I just want to put them on paper. So I'll probably run it by you within the next week, just for some quick feedback.
Yeah, shoot me an email, man, anytime.
Will do.
Yeah.
All right.
Courtney, you good?
I'm good. I'm ready to go to work.
You just need to get some coffee and get that bike back from the shop, innit?
Well, I've it's out front now. So
yeah,
it's good now. But now it's like after this conversation, I talked yesterday, it's like it's been definitely a shift to the direction I'm trying to go. So it feels good.
Good man. Yeah, you'll do great. Your work's awesome, man. You'll do good. Sid, all right?
Spike, thank you so much, man. This has been really helpful.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Yeah,
really grounding me back.
Thank you, mate. And we're talking later this week, Sid, so we'll get stuck into some more topics, right?
For sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It's inspiring. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Bye.